You're listening to Atlanta's news magazine, InfoStar, on Star 94 FM and 790 The Zone, WQXI AM. Now back to the show. Here's Rob Stadler.
Another smog season is about to begin in Metro Atlanta. And while the quality of our air has improved over past years, we still have a ways to go. A big way to lessen smog is carpooling and other commuting alternatives. And here to tell us about them is Brian Carr with the Clean Air Campaign. Brian, thanks for coming on InfoStar.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
Typically, when is Atlanta's air the dirtiest?
That's a great question, and I guess the best way to describe it is that when we have the onset of warmer weather, then there's a better likelihood that we might see some ground-level ozone forming in higher concentrations that can make things unhealthy. So you've got a mixture of climate conditions that are starting to set on here with the warmer months, humidity, a little bit of stagnant air, and that's all going to conspire against us as we get into the thick of summer.
Now, you mentioned ozone. That's one type of pollution here in Atlanta.
That's right. Ground-level ozone is most prominent during the warmer months, but also a year-round problem that we have in this region is particle pollution emitted from the things like smokestacks and tailpipes of vehicles. So it's a little bit of a double whammy that we're working against as a region. But the good news is that we're making progress on both fronts.
Well, how do we rank when it comes to the nation? Once upon a time, we were among the dirtiest cities in the nation, air-wise.
That's true that in the past that we did have some issues and some big challenges to overcome. But the good news is that we are getting better as a region overall, in that the latest rankings from the American Lung Association have us at the tail end of their rankings now, like maybe in the high 20s, whereas we used to rank in the teens or even in the top 10. So progress is being made. We've just got more work to do.
Who are in the high-risk groups, and what kind of health risks are associated with these pollutions, the ones that you mentioned?
For ground-level ozone and particle pollution, there is a particular subset of the population that might be more susceptible to having some of the adverse effects hit them harder. We call that the unhealthy for sensitive groups population that you might see on the air quality index. So when smog alerts are issued out in the region, the ones that are for code orange would be more aimed at people that are elderly or people that have some respiratory chronic conditions like maybe asthma or bronchitis, even young people, because children's lungs are still developing as they work their way through physical activities at school or summer football practices or what have you. Then those are some of the groups that are most susceptible to some of this pollution with the early onset of some of the ground level ozone concentrations.
Well, you did mention the air quality index readings. Run them down, all the colors and what they mean.
Most people are familiar with what used to be the terror level alerts. You know, they had the color-coded different conditions for threats and things like that. Well, a more friendly parallel to that would be the air quality index, which is created by the Environmental Protection Agency and is a way to inform the public about what's going on outside. Current conditions rank on a scale that's color-coded, tied to a numerical value based on what air monitoring stations would pick up in terms of data. So to distill that down, code green would be a normal good day, so that would be good air quality. Code yellow would indicate that there's a moderate issue with air quality, in that maybe there's a little bit of a risk out there if prolonged exposure happened over many, many hours. And then when you get to code orange and above, that's when that triggers a smog alert. So code orange, as we mentioned, was unhealthy for sensitive groups. Code red would be unhealthy for all adults and all groups. And then code purple is where we really haven't had to go in a long time, probably about 10 years since we've had a code purple, which means that there are some hazardous conditions outside and people should limit their physical activity outdoors.
What are some of the big things we can do to lessen the amount of smog in our air?
Well, it all begins for us in the Clean Air Campaign with programs that relate to the daily commute. The most predictable behavior that people have on a given weekday would be their trips to and from the workplace. And obviously, Metro Atlanta has been dealing for decades now with some systemic traffic issues. But the thing that maybe people don't know as much about is that half of all smog-forming emissions come from the tailpipes of cars. So the simplest way to tackle the problem and alleviate some of our traffic issues at the same time is to drive alone less often. So making people aware of their options like carpooling, van pooling, riding transit, teleworking where that's available, even bicycling or walking into a workplace is much better because it takes more tailpipes out of the equation.
Are more people carpooling? Especially, you got to mention the high gas prices. Are they having an impact?
Absolutely. We joke a lot that sometimes it's easy to see how we might thrive off of other people's misery, in the sense that high gas prices is a no-win situation for anybody, really. It's draining our economic vitality as individuals and as a region. But what that does, I think, is that it motivates more people to look for their options and start investigating what they can do. So the Clean Air Campaign is set up with resources like helping people find carpool partners that live and work near each other, making it easier to get started with some of these alternatives by offering incentives, financial incentives, including $3 a day, up to $100 to make the switch from driving alone, to test the waters and see if people can get used to the idea of not having the control of bringing their vehicle into their work site on a daily basis. So to answer your question, though, there are about 400,000 Metro Atlanta Atlantans each day that are doing something other than driving alone, and certainly carpooling ranks high, as does telework. In fact, in the most recent research that was made available from the Georgia DOT, telework actually has overtaken carpooling as the primary go-to option for commuters that use alternatives to driving alone. Carpooling is a very close second there, and it's certainly easy when you think about the fact that many people in this region have cars and have the choice that they can make whether they let someone else sit in that passenger seat with them on the trip to and from their jobs.
So I guess bosses are becoming more open to teleworking.
It is definitely a concept whose time has come. I think that more workplaces are beginning to realize that it's not so much about where the work gets done, but just that it gets done to the best of the ability of an employee. And that means that the lines have begun to blur a little bit. You go into any coffee houses these days and you see people plugged into their laptops using Wi-Fi. You go around to different parts in the region and see that there are employers that are making this concept work for them, and they're actually saving some money in the process. They're getting happier employees, getting more productive employees who are grateful for the privilege and don't want to do anything to mess it up.
You're listening to InfoStar on Star 94 FM and 790 The Zone, WQXI AM. I'm Rob Stadler. Our guest, Brian Carr, with the Clean Air Campaign about ways you can make Metro Atlanta's air cleaner. Well, despite the numbers you gave me, Atlanta still is very stubborn when it comes to carpooling and mass transit for that matter. Why is that?
I think it's a matter of just where people live relative to where they work. In fact, the average Metro Atlanta commuter spends about 35 miles a round trip each day just getting to and from their jobs. Some of it might involve a little bit of traffic congestion here and there, but the challenge is finding people that have proximity to transit where they are living in a community where it's more conducive to have live, work, play all in the same area. And I think that we're going to get there in the long term as a region. But on the carpooling front, I think it's just more a matter of making people aware of what's out there to help them. And I think that if more people knew about a database of more than 50,000 Georgia commuters that we have access to help connect people with friends and neighbors, even coworkers that might live and work near each other, that then more people would be able to take advantage of this. And it's about making it worth their while.
What kind of savings do you see normally from carpooling? And I'm talking gas and beyond.
Well, I think that we were surprised to learn that according to the AAA Your Daily Commute Costs survey that comes out annually, people are spending an average of about 47 cents per mile when they're driving alone in their vehicles. That includes everything from tires to maintenance, oil changes, even depreciation, not only just those things, but also the gas prices, obviously. So if you were to carpool once or twice a week over the course of maybe 50 weeks, let's say, just to round it out to a nice even year, then you could save upwards of a couple $1,000s. And that would be money that you could use to do the things that you enjoy.
You talked about carpooling. What about van pooling? Does Clean Air Campaign have a program for that?
Absolutely. The Clean Air Campaign has about 350 van pools on the road through a couple of providers here in the region and around the state. So the good thing is that a van can take about 14 cars off the road. And that's been a highly effective way for people that have long-haul commutes that maybe live in areas further outside of the metro core to get into the region here. And what we've heard is that there's an average of about an 80-mile-a-day round-trip commute for van pool commuters. So it's obvious that if you had the chance to sit in the back seat, let someone else do the driving, knock out a Sudoku puzzle or check your mobile phone, and send some text messages, that would be a much better way to do it than have to travel those long-haul distances by yourself.
Now, I've also heard of car sharing. Not the same as carpooling, is it?
That's right. Car sharing is a little bit of a different arrangement, and it's been extremely popular here in this region. The nature of it would be more like having access to wheels when you need them. So if you were to be a commuter that maybe rode transit into the office for the day but had a midday appointment that you needed to run out and do a quick errand, there are zip cars located throughout the region in conspicuously located parking places where it's as simple as signing up online, registering through Zipcar, and actually through your mobile phone in some cases can actually unlock the vehicle and go use it right there. So they charge by the hour, I believe, and you can actually get a pretty good deal when you sign on as a new member. So it's another great way to take the excuses out of why people think they need their cars in the middle of the day. There's access to car sharing that's around the region, growing increasingly over the last several years, and I think that more people are beginning to take part in that.
You talked about some of the other commuting alternatives, walking, bicycling. Is Atlanta a bike-friendly town?
Atlanta is becoming more of a bike-friendly town. When you look at the numbers overall, I think there are probably a couple hundred miles now of bike trails, everything from the Silver Comet out on the west side of town to an increasing number of people that I see as I'm riding in on MART every day along DeKalb Avenue that are turning to bicycling as a great option when they live close enough to where they work. And I think that overall we've got a lot of work to do as a region to make it more conducive. So you may have heard of the Atlanta Regional Commission's Plan 2040 as one way to help create more bicycle and walkable opportunities for people in more places around the region. Of course, that's Plan 2040 as in about 30 years from now. So we've got a lot of things to do in the meantime to make it more conducive. And one thing that employers are doing is that more employers are finding it better to offer amenities to their workers to have shower facilities or locker facilities where people can bike into the office and have an easy way to change out of their bike gear and get into their work clothes. And so more employers are turning to that as an option.
So if an employer says, I really need you in the office, let's scratch off the teleworking option. What about scheduling options as far as work goes?
Sure. Another example of a scheduling arrangement that would be similar to something alternative to doing the traditional 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in the office for 40 hours would be a compressed work week. So you can work the same number of hours in a pay period, but to do it in fewer days. So a common arrangement would be a 980, we call it, which would mean working 9 days out of a 10-day period of work days and doing all 80 hours in those 9 days instead. So you basically just tack on another hour each workday to what you normally do. And employers really love that arrangement because in some cases it can extend the number of hours that employees can serve customers.
What about flex hours?
Flex hours are another way to try to work around some of the rush hour issues. And rush hour, as we've all seen in the region, seems to extend beyond just 1 hour into many hours. So on drive time in the mornings and in the afternoons, if commuters were to leave for work earlier or later than the typical swell in the peak travel volumes, then they might be able to skirt around some of the traffic issues and get to work and be able to show up on time based on a new schedule that they could work out with their employer. It's still getting the same number of hours into a given pay period, but just staggering the times when people report to the office to avoid that crunch.
And of course, one of the reasons we have you in here, it's the beginning of Air Quality Awareness Week.
That's right. Air Quality Awareness Week, it's a celebration of the fact that we've come a long way as a state, and particularly in this region, in terms of improving the air we breathe. But there's definitely still a long road ahead of us, and it's about making every mile count through using alternatives to driving alone. It's a great opportunity for people to become air aware, to know what's going on out there in the region and what the state is working on here at large to make it safer out there for us to breathe in healthy air.
Brian, where can our listeners go for more information on Atlanta's air quality and, of course, commuting alternatives?
The Clean Air Campaign's website has a wealth of information ranging from how you can sign up for smog alerts to some simple tips for better air on the go. You can go to cleanaircampaign.org. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. It would be highly worthwhile to start a conversation with us about how we can help you to change your commute and to do something better for this region in terms of the air we breathe.
We've been speaking with Brian Carr with the Clean Air Campaign as we're about to embark on another smog season. Brian, thanks for being with us on InfoStar.
Much appreciated, Rob. Thank you, guys.
This is InfoStar, Star 94 FM, and 790 The Zone, WQXI AM.
Coming up, new software that helps parents of autistic kids. And speaking of children, are yours up to date on their vaccinations? InfoStar returns after the break.